The other night, I wanted to continue our investigation and take a closer look at the building where Alex was shot. Knowing its connection to fraud, I wanted to dig deeper. However, there was a vigil happening, a memorial for Alex, with a large crowd gathered. So, to take a closer look, I had to blend in and move discreetly through the crowd. Right over there is where Alex Peretti got shot. And then on this same block, as I approached the area, I noticed some unsettling graffiti, "Death to America," written on the wall. It's disturbing to see such sentiment here in Minnesota, and frankly, anywhere in the United States. Reminds me that there are people who seek chaos rather than community and safety. Getting closer, I recorded some of the names of the businesses on the side of the building, one of which was spelled incorrectly, much like the Leering Center. I also noticed some mail sitting on a ledge inside behind the glass window. So I took the liberty of recording some of the names on the letters. I plan on looking those up in the Minnesota Business Directory to uncover any connections to fraud. Most of the people had their back to me, so I went seemingly unnoticed. Though I did spot some individuals with torches. As I left the scene, I noticed that all the entrances to this area were blocked off by military-style Humvees. The National Guard had been brought in. Also, a few blocks away, I could see the police station was staging up with officers and gear, ready to take action if needed. So I go to the website, which is Minnesota Aging and Disability Resources, which the URL is mn.gov/AD resources. But I just entered the address for 2614 Nicollet Avenue and then searched for what's nearby. And it gives you a list of businesses that are at this address. And so I marked those down, wrote them down. And then I scrolled down and I clicked on the next page, and it shows you other businesses that are in the same category of aging and disability resources. And I clicked on the next page and the next page, and every page you click on, it shows you more of the same type of businesses in the area. And so I started putting all of these business names on a spreadsheet. But first, I just want to look at the businesses associated to 2614 Nicollet Avenue. And this is the business where Alex Peretti was shot. And we know from what's been cited so far from the Department of Justice is that the Smart Therapy Center, which is what this business used to, as part of the investigation that was, somebody was charged with $14 million of fraud coming out of this building from the Smart Therapy Center. But anyway, all this information is really hard to present because once you start going into it, you start realizing just how deep this fraud goes. Looking up all these businesses on the Minnesota Business Search tool, and you can find their addresses of, they're registered to this location. However, there's usually a secondary addresses of the manager's address or the other office address. They have a executive address, and then they have a registered office address, and then sometimes they have a manager-owned address. But you start looking into them, and one of the letters I saw there at this building was addressed to Access Care, Inc., which is registered to this address. And so when you look up Access Care on the Minnesota name search, there are 4 other businesses that come up with a similar name: Access Care Inc., Access Care Minnesota, Access Care Minnesota Inc., Access Care Solutions. And you look up each one of those, and all of those are also owned by Somali business owners. And each one of those has a different name attached to it. So they're not all the same name. And so when you open them, they're registered to different people. And then when you look at, so I wrote these down, and when you look up the address of where that one is associated, so you put it into Google, you look it up, it's registered to this address, which the name of the business is Access Care Incorporated or Access Care Minnesota. But when you search on Google, it's called Universal Child Care. And then when you look up Universal Child Care, it's also Somali owned and it's registered to a different address. But while I'm here on Google Maps, Google Street View, I look next door at the building, and this one is Aspire Academy. And so I look up Aspire Academy on the business search, and it's registered to a different Somali owned business person. And so you look that up. And every time you look up an address, it's registered to a different address. And when you go into Google and you look up that address, usually you find a different business name. So I looked up one address and it led me to, a different address. When I put that into Google and I do a street view. So, for example, this was a separate business called Comfort Adult Center by another Somali owned business name or Somali name. And when you get there on Google Street View, it's just a brick building. And I mean, there's an advertisement on the sign that says scan air filter. But this is the address of a Somali owned business called Comfort Adult Center, which is just nothing. You say, okay, well, the door's around back. And you'd be right. The door is over here. But this is just like a warehouse looking building. And we're supposed to believe that this is a adult care center. It's just like a loading dock and there's no windows, no doors. Well, I mean, there's doors, but there's 2 doors and it's just a loading dock. The rest of it is just a brick building. Let me jump to the other side here. This is the other side. This is your adult care facility that is getting thousands of dollars a month to support adult care facility. And there's just an alleyway. There's nothing here that looks like it would be an adult care facility in the traditional sense. This is just a warehouse. So that's one example. So going back to that map that I was on of all the daycare businesses, or not daycare businesses, but all the businesses within a certain region. So you just go down the rabbit hole and you just find more and more businesses that are just suspicious. And they all lead to the more you go into it, the more you find other branches of this tree. And going back to that Minneapolis, that Lake Street address, or not Lake Street, the Nicollet Avenue address, there's all these businesses that were within a few blocks of the place where Alex was shot. And every time I look one of these up, it just leads you to another suspicious business that offers the same thing. So within a 1-block street, there will be 5 daycares and 5 adult learning centers and 5 autism care centers and 5, like there's just 15 businesses that all do the same thing. And at one point I was over on Cedar Avenue. Let me put this into the Google Maps. let's see, I'm in Cedar Avenue, which this is a known area for being a very high density of Somali population. And these buildings have been pretty infamous lately in the news for being dominated by Somali residents. But where was this? Let me go down the street a little bit more. Oh, it's this one right here on the corner. So this business right here is on the 406th Street of Cedar Avenue South. And so this is registered as a child care center. The address is actually 406. So let's go down one right here. So this one says 401. But this one is Home Health Services, Cedar Home Health Services, which is owned by a Somali-owned business, which the address is 401 Cedar Avenue South. But when you look it up on the business website, the business name search, it's registered to a different address down the road, like across the street, which is registered to, let's see a little bit more. It's registered to one of these addresses. It's registered for down here. Let me just jump back though. Okay, so you're here and you're looking at, so this is a child care center. This is Home Health Services. And right next to this is another child care center. And then if we go over here, down this road, oh, here's one, Amal Money and Wire. And then I saw this is also owned by, let me go back to my spreadsheet. Oh, and do find Amal. So at one point I started looking up Amal. And Amal Money Wire is owned by Ilhan Hussein, which Ilhan Hussein also owns Amal Home Healthcare Inc., which if we look up this address, oh, it's the same. So he owns this, but it's also registered to, he owns a home health care and a money wire transfer care. No, I said that wrong. He owns a money wire transfer business, and he also owns a home health care business. So when the news has reported that some of the fraud money has been sent overseas, this is how they're doing it. They own a home healthcare business that gets millions of dollars from the federal and state government. And the same person owns a money wire business, funneling money from one business into the other one and sending it overseas. And so on my spreadsheet, I've come up with, just in a couple hours, I've come up with a list of, 80 different suspicious names. And I'm not seeking out Somali-owned businesses. What I'm seeking out is on the Minnesota Business Search tool, and I'm just looking up care, healthcare, daycare, autism, personal care. And when you look these up and you look them up on Google Street View, and you just look at the businesses nearby, like you go to one place and you look and you discover names of others, and you look up, and I'm not looking for Somali names, but I'm finding that all of them, nearly all of them, are owned by Somali owners. And it's just very interesting that they're all connected. The one thing I wanted to look up on the justice.gov website was regarding the housing stabilization services. They said, before the HSS program's inaugural year, the DHS predicted HSS program would cost about $2.6 million annually. That proved to be inaccurate. In 2021 alone, the HSS program paid out more than $21 million in claims. That figure ballooned in the following years, $42 million in 2022, $74 million in 2023, $104 million in 2024. In just the first 6 months of 2025, the program paid out another $61 million. So over here, I graphed that out on a spreadsheet. Well, I didn't graph it out. I laid it out on a spreadsheet. That is a total of $302 million in the last 5.5 years. Well, 4.5 years. And that's just the housing stabilization services.
The level of fraud in these programs is staggering. Unfortunately, our system of trust but verify no longer works.
The example I'll give is 1 million seconds is about 11 days, more or less. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. To give you a sense of how much 1 billion is, it is an astronomical amount.
There's another fraud scheme of the integrated community support fraud scheme, which is like home health services. So the housing one is just for housing assistance. This one is for home health services. That's another big one. And then the other one is autism. And then the other one is daycare. And so when they say there's close to $1 billion or over $1 billion, I can absolutely see how there can be a number that high because there's multiple schemes going on. There's daycare, autism, housing, and healthcare. Let me know what you guys think. I know I didn't present this information very well, but I kind of feel like the guy from Always Sunny in Philadelphia right now, because the more you dig into it, just the more you find it's just unraveling. There's so much going on. And there's so many businesses that are all claiming thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And the totals are in the millions, possibly the billions of dollars in the last 5 years, probably going back to the early 2000s. Some of the businesses that I looked up have been registered since the 90s or the early 2000s. So I'm going to keep digging, but this is just what I found so far in just a couple hours of looking around the internet.
About the explosion in claims. The state went from paying out $1 million in autism claims in 2017 to more than $220 million just last year.
Following the money is a full-time job for federal prosecutor Joe Thompson and his team at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota.
I think we've all come to understand the magnitude of the fraud problem here in Minnesota.
From Feeding Our Future to autism treatment centers to housing programs, Thompson made headlines this summer in this interview with 5 Eyewitness News reporter Jake Holes.
He expects the scope of fraudulent use of taxpayers' money will exceed $1 billion.
Do you stand by that?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that there was such a reaction to that comment.
Oh, come on. You weren't really surprised, were you?
I was. I thought that was obvious. I think ultimately we'll have prosecuted $1 billion worth of fraud. Not that there was $1 billion. There's far more.
Billions.
Billions.